introduce you to the history of catering in America and how blacks created and built this industry. My research of early black entrepreneurs in the 19th century often takes me to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It was clearly one of the centers for black prosperity at that time in American history. But black caterers were prominent throughout the North and South. Professor Juliet Walker at the University of Texas at Austin published an insightful book, The History of Black Business, Capitalism, Race, Entrepreneurship, Volume 1 to 1865. Black Success Prior to the Civil War. She presents a fabulous wealth of information that should be taught in our schools to attest to the genius of black enterprise during the building of this nation. Our first journey into these pages will focus on black caterers. This presentation is drawn directly from her book, from the chapter Catering, Restaurants, Hotels, and Taverns. Until the rise of the industrial city and the emergence of high-quality American hotels with their fine restaurants and food services, few whites could compete with African Americans in providing catering services for the rich, well-born, and powerful. Each major urban center had its prominent black caterer. Philadelphia, however, was the center of the antebellum black American catering industry. W.E.B. Du Bois described the city's black caterers as a guild whose masters included names which have been household words in the city for 50 years: Bogle, Augustin, Prosser, Dorsey, Jones, and Minton. Philadelphia's black caterers succeeded because they stoked both the palates and the egos of their clients. Their culinary specialties were lobster salad, deviled crabs, chicken croquet, and their unsurpassed terrapin. While few of Philadelphia's first black caterers had any formal education, they were masterful politicians and diplomats, described as gentlemen, aristocratic, possessing great wit and charm, commanding great influence, dictatorial, but always fine business attainments. The services provided were delivered with impeccable manners, taste, and elegance. As Du Bois said, Philadelphia's black caterers fill a unique place in a time when social circles were very exclusive, and the millionaire and the French white cordon bleu cook had not yet arrived. Although many of the first black caterers were from the French West Indies, American-born Robert Bogle professionalized the industry in the early 19th century and is recognized as the originator of catering. He provided elegant dinners and banquets in the homes of the wealthy, served by a retinue of uniformed waiters whose services matched those of the most correct English butlers. Bogle began as a hotel waiter and owned a coffee shop before he became a caterer. Robert Bogle. Born in 1774, he became one of the most successful businessmen in Philadelphia. He was also celebrated as an essential presence at all of life's main events, from christenings to funerals. Bogle established his shop at 46 South 8th Street in 1812 and is credited with having virtually created the business of catering. In addition to catering, Robert Bogle ran a funeral business for the social elite. Ode to Bogle, a light poem written in 1829 by prominent Philadelphia banker Nicholas Biddle, describes Bogle as an important contributor to any social event. quote, "Thy reign," the verse explains, "begins before our earliest breath, nor ceases with hour of death," end quote. The poem describes the caterer as a calm, unruffled administrator of sweet treats and funeral processions, a colorless colored man whose brow, unmoved, the joys of life surveyed, untouched the gloom of death displays. Robert Bogle died in Philadelphia in 1848. It was Haitian-born Peter Augustin, however, who, with his catering business established in 1818, eventually made Philadelphia the center of American catering. His clients included the city's elite and distinguished foreign luminaries such as Charles Dickens. Augustin's classic dish, terrapin, sold for $14 to $16 a quart. On returning home from America, many Europeans placed orders for their delivery to Paris and London. Peter Augustin was among the Haitian-born refugees come to America during their fight for freedom. In 1818, Augustin and wife Mary Frances purchased the already successful business of Robert Bogle and elevated it even further. Their Walnut Street business provided dining services, catering supplies, including china, tablecloths, tables, chairs, and other necessities for rent to his clients, making him one of the first event rental moguls in the United States. They co-owned a railroad dining car that catered to East Coast elite. By the 1840s, a challenging new group of Philadelphia black caterers emerged, the triumvirate of Jones, Dorsey, and Minton, who ruled the catering world from 1845 to 1875. In addition to their catering business, they also owned restaurants, invariably the first step to a catering enterprise. Henry Jones from Virginia was in the catering business for 30 years. Like many of the elite Philadelphia caterers, he also provided service to wealthy whites in New Jersey and New York. On his death in 1875, he left a considerable estate. Henry Jones. He was born into slavery in Virginia and traveled north as a young man and went to start his large, successful catering business in Philadelphia. Jones was a well-known caterer among a number of prominent black men of his day to have success in that industry. He was known as a careful, attentive, honest, and skillful man. He was, quote, a man of great care and faithfulness. Before his death, he decided he wanted to be buried at the all-white Mount Moriah Cemetery. Whites in the city blocked the funeral procession and the family's effort to bury him at the cemetery. They took the case to the state Supreme Court before he was allowed to be buried there. Thomas Dorsey, 1810 to 1875, came to Pennsylvania as a fugitive slave, was returned to slavery, but was purchased by friends he had made in Philadelphia. Thomas Dorsey was a slave in Maryland in 1812. After returning to Philadelphia, he established a successful catering business. His impeccable manners and a taste for unusual flavor pairings, plus self-reliance, propelled him to prosperity. He and the Philadelphia triumvirate of Jones and Milton became household names through much of this era and were known to command as much as $50 a plate. Of Henry Minton, the third of these illustrious caterers, Delaney said he, quote, is the proprietor of a fashionable restaurant and resort for businessmen and gentlemen of the city." End quote. Henry Minton was born in 1811 in Virginia, likely a slave. At 18, he found his way to Philadelphia and became an abolitionist, caterer, musician, and restaurateur. Of the triumvirate, Du Bois stated that Milton, quote, might have been said to rule the social world of Philadelphia through its stomach, end quote. Even today, descendants of Henry Milton reflect on what is remembered as an old adage, quote, in Philadelphia, anybody who was anybody hired Minton to cater their parties, end quote. Minton accumulated a net worth of roughly $40,000 at the time of his death in 1883. This was the golden age of catering for great success to Black Americans in Philadelphia and throughout the North and South. But it ended by the late 19th century as hotels began offering banquet services.